No, we did that in part 1. We have to get a move on this. We spent almost an hour on the first one, and I plan on getting this done. We have 2 whole characters to cover, so let's get going. Combat. Starting with the obvious, Spider-Man is the main character of the game, so naturally gets more attention in his combat. I stand by that our last game, Spider-Man 2, was easily the better in terms of its combat. It had room to grow in terms of giving each approach a purpose, but every combo was at least fun. You had a massive list of ways to take out each and every problem you came across in that game, and it made every fight feel different, because you could go about it in just about any way that you wanted. You dominated everyone that you came to blows with, both in the air and on the ground. So how does this game follow up that masterpiece? By stripping away the long lists of combos and going back to having 3 attack buttons that do the same thing most of the time. No, hear me out. Whereas Spider-Man 2 gave you all those different ways to approach a fight, Ultimate Spider-Man recognizes this is a younger, less skilled Peter Parker, and so balanced the fights around Peter's inexperience. You have your basic punch, kick, and grab buttons, as well as a web button. Unlike Spider-Man 2's web button, it's not incorporated into your combos, instead only being used for a separate purpose that we'll discuss later. For now, let's focus on those first 3 buttons. Your punch, kick, and grab. Punch and kick can both be chained 3 times at the beginning of the game, growing up to 5 consecutive hits by the end of the game, and a jump attack that works the same with either punch or kick, hitting once and allowing you to keep out of range while doing chip damage. While this seems really basic and feels like you could just button mash to win, if you think it's that easy, you clearly haven't played the game. In this game, you don't have a lot of health, and it doesn't take very many hits, even from the most random of enemies, to bring you down. That wouldn't be that bad if it weren't for the fact that enemies don't just sit there and take the punishment in this game. If you just walk up to enemies and start smacking any of the attack buttons, they'll block the combos and take no damage. This gets more prevalent the farther along you are in the game, and the only way to counter this is to switch up your fighting style more and more as the game goes on. This isn't a criticism though, it happens gradually throughout your time playing, giving you time to feel out the combat system and learn to work around that block. Despite not having as many combos as Spider-Man 2, it has its own benefit: the environment. See, through the first act, you might be able to get away with just using the different attacks in different combinations to throw enemies off. Eventually, that won't be enough. So to bring your attacks to the next level, you're going to need to start using the enemy's groups to your advantage. Very rarely is there going to be only one enemy to fight, excluding boss fights, which we'll get to later. So the first thing that you can do is to switch your target mid-combo. Simply attacking someone else not only gets through their guard, but also helps keep the other enemies in the group off your back. This isn't an Arkham game. They don't rush you one at a time, they will be attacking you all at once, and there's no dodge button. If you jump headfirst into a group of thugs with guns, they're gonna start lighting you up. So get in quick and just start jumping from enemy to enemy, jumping away when your spider sense tells you you're in danger. It's not as cinematic as Insomniac's games, or as creative as Spider-Man 2, 3, or Web of Shadows, but it has plenty of its own charm. When you're good at the combat, fights should last a few seconds at most, knocking down all the enemies at once before they can react. That said, some of the late game enemies have a bit of a heavier block to get through. And in that case, the best course of action is to make sure you're near something that you can jump off of. This includes most objects in the overworld with collision, namely walls. You just attack towards the wall during the middle of a combo, and Spidey will jump over and pinball off the wall to land a hit on these enemies. This breaks your combo, but does massive damage, and breaks any enemy's guard. Now, I haven't really mentioned grabs because they're just combo finishers. They won't go through block, but if you're already landing hits, a grab is a good way to finish off a weakened enemy, as well as launching you into the air to get away from the rest of the group. To be completely honest with you, I haven't really figured out how the grab works because certain combos will lead to stronger grabs with way cooler animations, but I have never in almost 200 years... I slipped up there. Now you know. But I have never in almost 20 years of playing this game figured out how to consistently replicate them. I'm convinced they either have something to do with your combo counter or pressing grab multiple times. Maybe both. But however you do them, they do massive damage and will almost always finish off any street level enemy. Of course, turning someone's skull into an eggshell and making an omelet out of their brain isn't enough to keep the hardened criminals of New York down. And that's where the web button comes in. Of course, you can use it to subdue enemies or do some quick damage. Holding the web button will tie them up, and following through with one of the face buttons will do one of 4 things. The punch button has you pull them towards you and vault over them, sending them behind you. Kick pulls them and then kicks them back away from you. Grab has you pull yourself towards the enemy, kicking them in the face. I like to think that this is the early precursor to the web strike. And finally, jump. If you're near a lamppost or something similar, we'll string the enemy up on the pole and leave them hanging for up to 10 seconds. If you remember in my Spider-Man 2 review, the web hang is absolutely my favorite move in the game, and it works pretty much the same here as it does there, but you get it from the start instead of waiting through most of the game for it. But even that isn't enough, because no matter what you do, after you take out an enemy, they'll get a flashing web icon over their head, and you have, like, give or take 10 seconds to web them to the ground, or they'll just keep getting up again. Sometimes, I let them get up, just so I can cave in their skull again. I'm a great superhero. If you web them up before knocking them out, though, then they'll just stay down, like good little criminals. Unfortunately, if you knock them out while they're webbed to a pole, they'll fall down, so you can't leave them all strung up and ready for the police like you can in Spider-Man 2 or 3. Now, the bosses of the game work quite a bit differently than the street crime, as they should. In Spider-Man 2, you could just use the hero punch a couple times and they'd crumble like paper. But in this game, you don't have anything like that. Out of 19 chapters, 11 of them are Peter's, and 8 of those are boss battles, with the other 3 being chases. For those bosses, you have Venom, Shocker, Rhino, Venom again, Beetle, Goblin, Sable, and Venom again. For Shocker, you just web up his gloves. Sable takes some time to work around her block, tranks, and agility, and Rhino has his own thing going on, since you can only attack the hole in his back. But for Venom, Goblin, and Beetle, the same tactic applies every time. You can run up and punch them a few times, excluding Beetle, sure, but they're likely to take advantage of that and use your close distance to do one of their hard-hitting attacks, like Beetle's bombs or Venom straight up eating you. The best thing to do, however, is to use your agility against them. Do dive kicks to get in for chip damage, then jump away before they can do anything. If you get a few seconds in between attacks to hit them with a combo before jumping away, great. More damage is good. But make sure you're always moving. That's about it. There's no definitive winning move, unlike the last couple of games. I love that, and it's a benefit of a more simplistic combat style. There's no one move that trumps the others. That limited fighting capability and quick movement necessity actually adds a lot to the feeling of the game, creating a tension in the fights and keeping you on your toes to make sure you react in time. Like I mentioned before, unlike almost every other Spider-Man game, there's no dedicated dodge mechanic. You simply have to pay attention to your spider sense and get out of the way manually before you get hit. I really appreciate this gameplay style, and might even prefer it over the way the other one works. Spider-Man 2 gets away with it because you can work it into your combos, but for most of the games, it's just a way to avoid damage to keep your momentum going. Which is fine, but making you do all the work just gives this game a little spice that I really appreciate. That said, when you get to the endgame and you're doing those endgame combat tours, it can get to be a little much. It's very difficult to build any kind of combo because every enemy has a very tough block to get through, lots of health, and lots of fun ways to turn you into a spider-themed stain on the pavement. Whether it's ninja girls that shoot fireballs, cyborgs with miniguns attached to their arms, or fat guys with knives, every fight has a kind of boss that keeps your attention while the other enemies chip away at your health. It feels rewarding to get past them, but the skill ceiling for some of those combat tours is a little high for a game with such a simplistic combat system, to the point where the only way to win in those tours is to go around the corner and web pull enemies to you and pick them off one by one. Hey, I didn't say the simplicity was 100% great, but Spidey isn't the only character in this game. We have another, much bigger toy to play with. Taking up the other 8 missions of the game, Venom has an even smaller kit to take advantage of. Instead of punch and kick, he gets a claw attack and a tendril whip. Basically, a powerful short-range attack and a weaker long-range move. He does have a grab, but it works more like Spider-Man's webs, and we'll get to it later. What does he have to replace the webs, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Vor. Venom vores people. Now, as much of a reason as that is on its own, it's actually important. The suit is consuming Eddie, so eating others temporarily holds that off and heals Venom. But, and I feel like this needs to be brought up, why does eating regular civilians give you more health than eating a soldier in peak human condition? If it's based on draining their life force or something, don't you think that consuming the person trained by S.H.I.E.L.D. would offer more than the person who ate Cheetos for breakfast? I know it's a game mechanic, but this is my video, let me rant. The claw and tendril attacks have a 3-combo system, like Spidey does at the beginning of the game. But, unlike Spidey, you don't gain any more as the game goes on, and you can't combo the moves off of each other all that well. You can switch between them mid-combo, but it doesn't change what they do, and really doesn't give you any kind of advantage. On top of that, the grab does one of 3 things. If you grab then claw attack, you'll slam your enemy into the ground. If you grab twice, you'll throw your enemy over the horizon, which you can also do to cars, ballin'. And if you claw then grab, you pick your enemy up in both hands and snap them in half. That's it. This is the best fucking game ever. Naturally, this is an instant kill on any enemy, and it is metal as fuck to see Venom fold a bitch in half. Now, like I said, Venom has 8 missions out of the 19 in the game, and 4 out of 12 of those are boss fights. The other 3.5 basically just being fuck up everything you see missions. Those 5 bosses are Wolverine, fuck yeah, Electro, Sable, Beetle, and Carnage. Now, while I like the general combat of Venom less, the boss fights are way fucking cooler. Wolverine is super close quarters, and he fucks you up if you aren't careful, but you can use people hiding in the bar to heal. Electro is more open, but he's faster and stronger than you, so you need to use your environment to your advantage. Beetle traps you in a box where you gradually get less space to stand, all while you need to dodge his attacks, and Carnage has all of your powers, and he's even a little faster than you. Oh yeah, Sable's there too, I guess. I'm kidding. Her speed makes her way harder to hit, so you need to use your tentacle attacks to whittle down her health. Now, I have to admit, all of these boss fights can be cheesed with the grab claw combo, but slamming Wolverine face first into the tile is so satisfying I can't even be mad. And unlike, for example, the web ball in Spider-Man the movie, there is risk to using the ground pound, because getting close enough to grab opens you up to taking a lot of damage yourself. Of course, after the main game is complete, you open up free roam for Venom, and destroying things in that mode summons the police, then the military, and finally S.H.I.E.L.D. in an endless destruction mode until you eventually die. Admittedly, once S.H.I.E.L.D. starts hitting you, it gets hard to stay alive. They fly on jetpacks, so they're good at staying out of your reach, their weapons do an ass load of damage, and they evacuate any area you're in before you get there, so there aren't a lot of civilians to refill your health with. It is just fun to wreak havoc until they take you out. I know it would break any kind of continuity, but I wish that if you got your score high enough, Spider-Man would show up and kick your ass. I can dream. So that's about it for Spider-Man and Venom's combat ability, and I have to say, this is some of the most fun for me when it comes to Spider-Man games. Like I said, both characters lack some of the creativity of other Spidey games, but the agility and skill ceiling of Spider-Man, mixed with this being the only Spider-Man game, aside from Friend or Foe, that lets you play as Venom, and having Venom himself be such a fun power fantasy, makes this one of my favorite games to just run around and beat people up. I think Spider-Man 2 edges it out just a little bit with its more complex combo system and creative uses of Spidey's abilities, but even with its flaws, it would be a crime for me to award this game any less than a 7 out of 10. God damn it, that's cool. Okay, 8 out of 10. Traversal. I know I keep bringing up Spider-Man 2 in this video about Ultimate Spider-Man, but the game came out a year before this one, was made by most of the same team, and most importantly, Spider-Man 2 was the groundwork for just about every Spider-Man game following this. This was the first game to try and follow up after the success of Spider-Man 2's traversal system. So, how does it compare? Well, for starters, it isn't physics-based in the same way that Spider-Man 2 is. So, while that means a lower skill ceiling and removes some of the weight and control that you feel in Spider-Man 2, they kept the momentum and trajectory factors, which were really the 2 most important things. Movement in Ultimate feels lighter and more like gliding in some spots, almost like the gravity for Peter is turned down. I kind of like it here because Raimi's Spider-Man always felt heavier to me, less like a dancer and more like a gymnast. Still acrobatic, but in a different way. So having the weightier swinging in Spider-Man 2 that feels more dynamic is good for that game, but having a game with a much younger and smaller web swinger necessitates adjusting that feeling to be lighter. Some elements are the same, the most important also feeling the most obvious, but Spider-Man still swings around on webs connected to buildings. Remember that this was the second game to have anything like this, and there was no guarantee that after the breakout success of the last game's web swinging, that they'd be able to recreate it. So it's a pretty big deal that we got another free-roam Spider-Man game right away. So the web's still attached to anchor points along the buildings, and like I said, the momentum and trajectory were still important for your swing in this game. You could just throw out a web from the ground, but you wouldn't be going very fast. You'd need to start building up speed. And it's a little simpler this time around. The angle of your swing will be what determines your speed and your height. If Spidey lets go at the bottom of his arc, he'll increase his momentum, but if he goes to the top of that arc, he'll launch himself upwards, losing speed, but gaining height. This is somewhat similar to Spider-Man 2, but that game had you be a lot more precise, meaning that this game lets you focus on other things much more easily, something that I think allowed the chases to be much faster paced, even if the other game technically didn't have a speed cap and this one does. This game has a much lower skill threshold at the expense of a lower skill ceiling. This game does have a few things that are just better than Spider-Man 2's system. To start, it doesn't need to worry about silly things like reality, so you get the magical inclusion of a double jump.
Sure, it breaks the laws of physics, but so do most things I do.
Something that is surprisingly not in most Spider-Man games. Of all characters, he's like the one no one would bat an eye at double jumping. I love this so much more than the air trick system of Spider-Man 2. For as much as I love that game swinging, and I'll take any chance I can to go back to it, when you're really moving, there's just no way to quickly make adjustments, whether in direction or height, without losing some of your speed. Ultimate doesn't have that problem, because anytime you swing, you can follow it up immediately by bouncing off the air to gain plenty of extra height, as well as to make any directional changes that you may need. Of course, Spider-Man 2 did have one traversal tool for redirection, the web zip, that you acquire partway through the first act or so. It allows an easy way to change direction at the cost of a little speed. In this game, however, you have the web zip from the beginning of the game, and while I'm pretty sure they work almost exactly the same way, I swear that Ultimates feels more refined. At a guess, based on literally nothing, Spider-Man 2's web zip fires the line straight forward, so your timing needs to be more precise to maximize the speed of your pull. Whereas in Ultimate, it automatically makes the adjustments to give you the best web zip almost every time. On top of that, the cooldown, so to speak, between uses of the move is much shorter in Ultimate, making it much easier to use while quickly flying through the New York streets. That said, it wouldn't be honest to leave out the negatives in this game's traversal. For starters, the less complex physics system gives you less tools if you make a mistake. Say you go too high in your swing arc and end up launching yourself up, in Spider-Man 2 this would keep most of your forward speed, making it fairly easy to correct yourself and stay in the flow of things. If you make that mistake in Ultimate, you all but skid to a halt. You have to put much more effort into getting back any speed you built up. This is worsened by the wall run being severely nerfed in this game. In Spider-Man 2, perfecting the wall run was difficult. You have to have sufficient speed, hold the sprint button, and press the grab button against a wall-to-wall run. Something that sounds easy on paper, but took practice to get good with. From there, you could launch off, go around the building, or even just let your momentum slow. There were plenty of options, and it is an incredibly useful tool to maintain your speed and look good while doing it. You could always slide along the walls and use them to bounce off of while moving. Any obstacle in your way could be used to enhance your swing. Ultimate Spider-Man has the basics of most of that. You can still wall run and jump off walls, but the mechanics are much more limited in this game. You can wall run for less than a second, and while in Spider-Man 2 you'd slow down but keep upright to allow you to use your tools to reset, if you don't jump off before your wall run ends, you lose all momentum and go into a wall crawl. Wall running can be good to quickly change direction, but the web zip dwarfs it in every way, essentially making it useless, to say nothing about the wall jump. So for every step it takes forward to improve on the traversal, it takes a step back, unable to surpass its predecessor, but not falling behind it either. We aren't quite done yet though. Just like with combat, little Eddie Brock Jr. gets his own section, albeit much shorter than Spidey's. There's nothing to really directly compare Venom to, as we've never had an open world Venom game before or since. Oddly enough, the closest thing I can compare Venom's movement to is one of the Hulk games, mostly to the Incredible Hulk that came out in 2008. Venom loses Spidey's double jump over web swinging, but makes up for it by being able to take to the skies from wherever he wants, jumping tens of stories in one button press. You can traverse arguably faster than Spidey himself, but admittedly, jumping isn't as engaging as web swinging. I personally prefer to make slightly smaller jumps from building to building and using the secondary mechanic to add some fun to it. Just like Spidey, Venom has his own zip mechanic, sending out a tendril to quickly pull himself in a direction and adjust his trajectory. It has a much longer cooldown than Peter's web zip, and given Venom's lack of a double jump, it can't be used to stay in the air indefinitely. He has some cool mobility options, but unlike Spider-Man, they aren't as well utilized. Speaking of which, the main thing that sets this game apart from Spider-Man 2 for me, aside from Venom because no shit, is the races. Sure, Spider-Man 2 had trick races to earn points and stuff, but they were mostly just point A to point B kinds of things, and didn't really give any kind of reward. In this game, however, each race feels like a real test of the web swinger's abilities. The easy races mostly being the same A to B style, but the more races you unlock, the harder they get, requiring you to land, wall run, wall jump, and far more to get through them, not only correctly, but quickly. While I don't like the nerfs to some of Spidey's skills, they are utilized perfectly in these races. Venom has races as well, but frankly, they just don't speak to his skill set as well as Spidey's. I'd much prefer to be using Venom's particular skills to run from the police. I mentioned that Spider-Man 2 doesn't give you rewards, but what do these give you? Well, based on your time, you'll get one of 4 medals, ranging through bronze, silver, gold, and ultimate. There's no better feeling in this game than achieving an ultimate rank on a race, and if you do it for each race, that is proof that you are a master of this game's movement, and you fucking earned that medal. But that wouldn't be enough. Do you remember back in part 1, near the beginning, I mentioned Johnny Storm showing up?
Yo, Spidey!
Well, that section is what unlocks the races, and after completing a certain amount of each tier of race, you unlock a rematch with Johnny on top of the Baxter building, and winning those unlocks the next tier of races. They get progressively longer and harder, starting by racing to Times Square and back, then to Midtown High and back, then to Empire State University and back, and finally, all the way around the island of Manhattan. These are the ultimate test of your skill at this game, and frankly, each one makes you feel like an absolute legend for leaving one of the famous Fantastic Four in your dust. Now, I have to warn you, as somebody who has played this game for effectively their entire life, do not bother with the final Johnny Storm race. It is the single hardest thing I have ever had to complete in a video game, and I completed the Generation 7 National Pokédex. It will drag you in, consume you, burn you down to ash, then demand you get back up and take it again. See, the thing about the Human Torch here is that he's a goddamn cheater. No, I'm not fucking with you. Halfway through the final race, he puts on the fucking nitro and leaves you behind. I've never even seen the Baxter building before he wins. That's right, after nearly 20 years, I have yet to beat this race, which means that I haven't been able to unlock the final suit in this game. What, pray tell, is the final suit? Peter Parker in a hoodie. Are you fucking kidding me? I already unlocked the version without a hood, you goddamn flaming pile of shit. Sorry, I lost my cool for a second there. Yeah, so the last race is ungodly difficult, but I'm sure if you were actually good at video games, unlike me, you'd be able to beat it. Besides, nothing will make you appreciate this game's traversal mechanics more than handing the bright burning bastard his own ass. So between everything, the ups, the downs, and the emotional trauma, I'd say that this game, at bare minimum, has to match its counterpart, Spider-Man 2, with a 9 out of 10 in traversal.
And I've got 2 words for you. Bring it on.
Audio-visual. Wait. Is this the first game I made a review of where I've actually liked the voice acting? Hallelujah! It's a goddamn miracle. I don't have to sit through hours and hours of Tobey Maguire's whiny-ass voice or listen to Josh Keaton be massively underused. All jokes aside, this game looks and sounds fantastic. I mean, just compared to Spider-Man 2. Do you mean to tell me these 2 games came out a year apart? That's not good enough for you? Let's talk about the way Ultimate Spider-Man City looks. For 2004, Spider-Man 2 did a passable job when it came to giving you boxes that vaguely looked like New York skyline to attach your web to. Now Ultimate Spider-Man comes along and gives us so much more color, detail, overall, just an incredible capture of New York from both the ground and the air. Now, Spider-Man 2 does get points for including Roosevelt Island and even allowing you to play on the Statue of Liberty, as far as I'm aware, being the only game that allows you to do so. But Ultimate Spider-Man makes up for it by including a huge part of Queens as well as the expected island of Manhattan. I'm just gonna throw up some transition slides of different points in each game for you to compare and let you draw your own conclusions on which one's better. And don't forget that in Ultimate Spider-Man, you actually go to the other side of that bridge. Now, admittedly, the models from the first tie-in game to the Spider-Man movies has models that look significantly better than the sequels, but at that point, it comes down to stylistic choice, with Spider-Man 1 and 2 going for more realistic designs, while Ultimate Spider-Man got the freedom to go loose and just let itself embrace the comic book designs. I think that it holds up far better than the other Spider-Man games of this era, even all the way up to games like Shadow Dimensions, because it embraces its style, and because of that, it has a mostly timeless feel to it. But even aside from the specific style, comparing it to the last two games, the character models do just feel fuller and more like characters, rather than just facsimiles of human bodies. I mean, come on. Like I've already said, when it comes to the voices, this is probably the first thing I think of when reading the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. The voice of Spider-Man, Sean Marquette, delivers a fantastic performance and stands among actors like Christopher Daniel Barnes, Josh Keaton, and Yuri Lowenthal as the voice I hear in my head for Spider-Man. Despite this being the only game where he wears the webs, he knocks it out of the park, and oddly enough, this won't be the last time I talk about him in the Year of the Spider reviews. Alongside Sean are frankly quite a few names that I don't recognize, and a couple that I do. Namely, Daniel Capolero as Eddie Brock, Arthur Burghardt for when Eddie dons the suit as Venom, Dave Fennoy, wait, holy shit, I recognize him too, that's Lee from the first Telltale Walking Dead game, supplying his suave voice for the cool Nick Fury, James Arnold Taylor for Electro, and the always stunning Jennifer Hale as Silver Sable. I've already mentioned how much I adore Marquette's voice for Peter.
That feeling that just overwhelmed you? That's losing!
I don't really know what kind of voice direction he was given, or if that's all him, but it never ceases to amaze me how hard he nails this role. Capolero also does a great job, and the voice fits Eddie well, but after reading the actual comics, I can't get it out of my head that it should sound slimier. I mean, the guy was around 19 to 21, hitting on the 15-year-old Gwen Stacy and getting pissy when she turned him down. He's a sleazeball. That said, when the suit takes over and we hear Burghardt's take on Venom, it just puts a smile on my face.
I have absolute, total control.
I grew up on the 90s animated series, so my Venom was always Hank Azaria. But recently, I can't unhear Moe from The Simpsons every time I watch it, so now in my head I've defaulted to Burghardt's version. I know it's edited in post, but it just sounds so wet. I love how every word sounds like it's dripping with malice and drool. We unfortunately don't get to hear too much of Venom's voice outside of grunts and snarls, with the occasional single word thrown in, like mine. But when he does get to let loose, like the opening cutscene of the game and the ending battle on Trask's Tower, Burghardt doesn't hold back. I won't go into as much detail on Fennoy's Nick Fury, or Hale playing Sable, or any of the many other fantastic performances in this game, but every single one brings life to a game that is already a comic book page brought to a console. Even Shocker gets some respect with Brian George at the helm for both Herman and Adrian Toomes. Honestly, I could keep going. Every performance, every line is delivered perfectly, and I will keep going back to this game year after year, if only to hear the incredible voice actors that put their all into this game. Now, that's all I covered in the last review I did, but there's something in this game that I would be remiss not to mention that, frankly, I just didn't care about in the last game, and if I had talked about it, it would have just lowered the score. And that's the soundtrack. I've been playing segments of that OST in the background for both part 1 and part 2 of this video. Shh, don't tell YouTube, they'll never watch this far. And honestly, it's so good that I've been listening to it while I type out this script. I don't really think about the soundtrack of games, and that's a good thing most of the time, because a good soundtrack for anything should fade into the background and just provide good support to the media that it's in. And this game does. I almost never notice it. If you take the time to listen to it sans the game though, every single track is a bop that deserves your attention. Like I said, I would kick myself if I didn't mention that in the video. Go check it out, it's on YouTube, though sadly not on Spotify. Now that I've rambled on long enough and bored away all the people that only care about the funnies, I will say that the audio-visual portion of this game's score is going to sit at a 9 out of 10. I take away that 1 point out of pettiness, as I want this game remastered with updated models and textures, but otherwise, don't touch the fucking thing. Leave it as it is. Capiche? 9 out of 10. Conclusion. Alright. Oh, it's finally fucking done. I've been writing this script between my 2 actual jobs whenever I find free time, and it's finally fucking here. This game was hard to write for because no matter how hard I try, I just can't keep my nostalgia out of it. I did my best, and I'd like to think I presented things in the best way that I could, but I recognize this was my first introduction to the whole character of Spider-Man, aside from a couple episodes of the 90s show, and I don't know, like 2 episodes of the MTV show. This game is the reason we're doing the Year of the Spider. It's the reason I dressed up as Spider-Man for Halloween. Yeah, I'm working on my body, okay? This game introduced me to the comics, the TV shows, the Raimi films. Honestly, it introduced me to my love of... I was gonna say Spider-Man. It introduced me to my love of superheroes in general. I wouldn't care if it weren't for this game. I can honestly say, without any of that, I probably wouldn't have become a writer. And that's what I love to do, because of this game. I wouldn't have gotten along with most of my friends nearly as well. Certainly not Garrett and John, my co-hosts on the channel. This game means the absolute world to me, and I hope I've done a halfway decent job of explaining what makes it so special, as a Spider-Man story, and certainly as a game. I truly believe that almost no Spider-Man game before or since has expressed such a true representation of the character as this one. The closest, of course, are Insomniac's games, and I hope so heavily that they continue that trend and that their sequel is even more incredible than the last. But we aren't here to discuss that game. Unfortunately, I think that despite how amazing this game is and how much it means to people like me, it just really isn't that important in the grand scheme of Spider-Man games. It isn't Spider-Man 2 revolutionizing the way that superhero games are not only made, but how they're perceived. On the other web, Spider-Man 3 came along after this, and if it hadn't bombed as hard as it did, I'm going to die, then I doubt Beanox would have come along to take over the games, and Dan Slott's work on the stories of those games laid a lot of the groundwork for his comics, which in turn paved the way for Insomniac's foray. There I go again, slipping into talking about Insomniac. Look, my point is that amidst all of that, Ultimate Spider-Man stands as the middle child, forgotten and left to fend for itself. Spider-Man 2 sold 2 million copies and averages an 80 to 90% rating through most circles. In contrast, Ultimate Spider-Man didn't even break 1 million, landing closer to 700,000 and averages a slightly lower 70 to 75% score in those same circles. Even now, it sits in Spider-Man 2's shadow as that other one. Thankfully, with this being Spidey's 60th anniversary, just barely, a lot of people have started talking about this game more. Evan Filarka, I'm sorry, I don't really know how to pronounce your name. Reboot Overload, Retro Rebound, and more have all given their take on this game in the last year, and people are rightly remembering it. I stand that it deserves to be remembered as one of the best, even if others may not agree. This game is getting my rating of 9 out of 10, and if others disagree, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This game deserves a modern remake, but let's be honest, it probably wouldn't work. If this is all we'll ever get, then it wasn't just amazing, it was ultimate. And yes, I know I already used that joke. With that, the video's over, and I just have a few last-minute announcements and stuff to go over. With any luck, this video will be out before December's over. I've been working on it since October. Originally, I was going to be taking a break from this to put out my Pokemon videos, but at this point, I don't know that I will. So if you're watching this, because these do tend to be my more popular videos, check out my other channel, linked below, Pocket Monster Uncut, to watch my Pokemon playthrough. And that is Pokemon Scarlet, the game that just released this year. If you enjoy that and show me, if I see that those videos are getting a little more attention, I will consider editing them down and putting them in a more watchable format on this channel. I'll be back to Spider-Man as soon as possible, maybe just a couple weeks to get started on the Spider-Man 3 review. Or actually, the Spider-Man 3 playthrough. The review hasn't even been started yet. Now, I do have to say that these videos take an egregiously long time to make. I mean, I recorded the playthrough back in June and released the actual videos early September, and the first part of the review came out a month ago. This part's coming out at the end of the year. This was the 4th game we played, the 4th one out of 14. I have plenty more on the pipeline I'm sure people hopefully will love, but I just hope those of you that like my videos so far can be patient with me. I work 2 jobs and basically just do this for fun, so it's a bit slow going. That said, I really do love making videos for you guys. Every like and comment, few as they may be, really do just fuel my ego. If you guys did enjoy, like, comment, do all the things you normally do, but most importantly, share the video. YouTube loves to bury small creators like me under the giants of Markiplier and even other Spider-Man tubers, like probably Spider-Man. Oh, check him out though, he's great. So the best thing you can do for me if you want me to make more content is tell other people, spread the word, just let them know I'm doing stuff and that you like it. Well, I'm gonna head out because this video took a lot out of me. So I'm gonna go sleep for like the last 3 days of the year. Have a great rest of your day. Be gay. Do crimes. See you next time. Oh, and don't worry, I didn't forget the villain counter.